I have some recent reflections on teaching method and on learning how to learn. This is a subtle anecdote, but because you are who you are, I think a lot of you will take interest, and especially because so many of you are teachers, it seems relevant. So last week, I wrote the August 27th workshop on joint rotation. And there's a place in the workshop where an objective reference, like a skeleton, if I came in with a skeleton, that would be of great learning interest for numerous people in the room, because I'm going to talk about the sources of stability of the spine, especially in the middle and the upper back. And so if I were to bring in some objective reference point, or ask you to look at pictures like anatomical drawings or something, there's a part of a lot of our minds, because we are trained in this rigorously materialist educational system, wherever we're coming from. We've been trained to be materialists. There's a part of our brain that learns through materialist reference, and so it would be helpful and easy for me to do, and a good hook in the classroom. And I decided not to pander. One, because the workshop is designed for advanced students. And two, because on the level of integrity of instruction, it's how many times am I going to make that compromise to act as if the body is a material thing? That's not actually true. Our physical bodies are not Vitruvian. They are not the thing depicted in Grey's Anatomy. Every single one of us, has a face that is irreducibly our own. And that's made up of habit patterns and history and bone structure and connective tissue and patterns of muscle use and physical structures. And that absolute unique quality of this face is not different in the face of the vertebra that meets the disc. There's an individuality and irreducibility that is in some ways trivial. From a Western mind standpoint, we look at what is generalizable and what is material and what sort of lasts and can be dissected instead of experienced, right? And yet, at the same time, when it comes to drawing awareness to this really difficult to directly experience part of the spine, which is we're going to be talking about some of the bone structures that sort of wing off the side of the spinous processes. Acting as if we are the model can really get you some purchase on direct experiences that then you can remap into your experience. But it's really, really, really not yoga method. So from a perspective of me as a teacher, teaching teachers, am I gonna pander and do it wrong and work from the materialist standpoint? Or am I actually gonna stop and remember that every instruction also contains a whole lot of meta instruction, and especially at an intermediate and advanced level, so much of what we're doing is not getting the point across and teaching you things, but actually teaching process. And so much of what we're doing in the classroom is learning how to learn, because we're thinking about the long range of our practice, not just this individual quote, workout or whatever. And so to that point, if you think about it, the methods that we have in yoga for understanding the highly individual and yet shared nature of our spinal structure are the breath, all of the ways in which the consciousness follows the breathing when we take it inside, the bandha, and I mean that in a kinesthetic sense, in our ability that develops over time to take the awareness inside, pratyahara, and to feel the inner body instead of experiencing the body as a thing that does actions and fulfills instructions, but also a blooming internal entity that has many, many different possible feelings that can be built out as we develop the inner nervous system over time. So when I say bandha, I just mean the entire inner kinesthetic universe that for many of us at the beginning of the practice just is totally undeveloped, right? And drishti. So drishti is, a place of resting the gaze so we can be aware inside. But there's also an inner eye, a real, it's not just imagination. The faculties of the inner eye, of inner sensing, are also not super well developed in a society that's dependent on constant stimulation through the image and through screens, right? Like looking outward to build our sense of the image. But we also have this whole pratyahara of the gaze that comes over time as we use these scientific research tools of breath, bandha, drishti, and actually explore the inner universe. And so, especially with beginners, I'm really focused on meeting people where they're at in terms of habitual learning styles, like whatever language they bring and whatever orientation they bring to the practice. It's all good. It all totally works. Go through the doorway you came to. It's yoga is so vast. There's so many facets of this jewel. You can understand it as a physiological thing. You can understand it as a habit formation thing, whatever, right? And at the same time, when we limit ourselves with the idea that I have a particular learning style, I need to have the materialist standpoint and the external data and the picture to really understand what's going on in my body, there is a way in which we also are not learning how to learn from the yogic standpoint, from yogic science, which is inherently subjective. And from the beginning of my experience in the Western yoga world, I've encountered this orientation to smart yoga, which is actually the most inflexible, mentally, intellectually inflexible yoga, which is we need to have the data and the physiological, anatomical, generalizable, objective understanding of body movement. There's a lot of value in that. Totally, give me all of your MRIs, give me all of your PT, super physiological data, all of that is great. And at the same time, the stance that comes with that, which is so common, it's hilarious, that this is the intelligent approach because it's objective, because it's verifiable, is really not the smartest approach, right? What it speaks to is a poverty of the imagination, and I mean the inner eyes development, a poverty of the kinesthetic internal sensing, and of the intelligence of the breath, which can be moved around the body to sense things. There's intelligence in the subjective research mode. It's just that what you get when you use that tool is not generalizable. It's the subjective tools that clarify for us just how very individual each of our experiences is. So yogic science is, in a way, not reproducible, which can be frustrating for those of us who come from this super materialistic kind of scientific method, such as it is. Most of you who are in that world know how totally fallible and problematic scientific method is. But in any case, when we come to yogic science with this idea that our findings are going to be generalizable outside of ourselves, we're deeply disappointed, right? So that can lead to like the materialist view feeling beguiling and interesting and satisfying on the mental level. And I do find a lot of value in it, especially in earlier years of practice. But this is the background rationale for me asking you to work with your inner senses for some really difficult material, like that we're going to be looking at in 2 weeks. Because I actually think that there's more to be gained from that approach, the subjective, this super personalizable data gathering entry point into, in this case, feeling your spinous processes. Again, since there's so many teachers in this group, I think you all know this intuitively already. Those of you who've been mentored, you know it. But it bears saying explicitly that so much of what the mentoring process looks like at a certain level is training the teacher in how not to know. And the very knowing teacher is like that's the most limited teacher. That's like a very junior varsity stance to think that we know like what this field is, what yoga is, and especially to have the idea of like manifesting and demonstrating one's knowledge. So, why don't you all listen while I don't know, chant the entirety of the Yoga Sutras or something. That's like the JV stance, that kind of demonstration of knowledge. So the teacher is expected to have all of that. You're supposed to know like all of your anatomy. You're supposed to know all of your scriptures. You're supposed to know all of the technicalities of the vinyasa, all of that. You are responsible for that material. You are on the 1,000,000-hour teacher training. It never ends. You have to be curious forever. And at the same time, as you develop in that teacher role, the less you know. And the whole thing is facilitating others' explorations into their own knowledge. And that's also why this subjective science is so valuable in the yoga field, because it's not reproducible and you can't pin it down at all. The objective is the kind of knowledge that you can put in a book and the kind of knowledge that you can know, right? The subjective knowledge is more evanescent, and the ego has a much harder time like forming an identity around it because there is an evanescence around subjective knowledge. So yeah, that's all I've got on this. But again, I think I'm at the place with you all, with this more advanced group, of sometimes being a disappointment where I could give you the like objective and like satisfying easy learning tools, but instead I'm going to ask you to like go into areas of confusion, going into areas of like not feeling like you know what you're doing. Like that is more about learning how to learn than about like knowing, having the thing.